the layers that you're describing in this code. Do you see it, or is it, in your opinion, connected to this intelligence or this source?
Well, it has to be. This rabbit hole is pretty deep. What's clear to me is that there's definitely someone there, and they're very aware of everything we're doing. As far as I understand, we essentially reached a level where they can no longer remove themselves from our awareness. They did that for as long as they could, and now we're just too advanced. If we're going to keep evolving, they essentially have a protocol by which they're gently notifying us that we're about to find out we're not alone and all that stuff. Finding the code and the fact that it's now visible and all that stuff. I think it's part of that, I guess what you would call the disclosure.
Yeah.
And to me, and this upsets a lot of UFO people, and if you're one, it might upset you, but I think that the disclosure does not come in the form of somebody coming on TV and telling you something. The disclosure can happen right now. If you make yourself sensitive enough to it. Like, it's being disclosed to you as we speak.
I say it all the time, brother. Man, it was great meeting you in LA for the moment, and I enjoyed your talk as well. Although I've seen a lot of your podcasts and stuff. So welcome to the show. Thank you for beaming in, brother.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So, man, the work you're doing is really exciting to me, having experience in more than one way with this incredible molecule. And everybody, of course, is talking about this experiment you did with DMT, for those of you joining us who may or may not know who Danny is. And people report seeing what you describe as, and I have some experience with this too, as a kind of shared structure or code. So let's start there. What actually happens in the experiment, if you could break that down?
If you project a diffracted light, diffracted laser on a surface, and you happen to be on DMT, you will see what seems to be some kind of a self-executing structure that looks to be made out of this code. Essentially, that's what everybody is seeing.
So let me just break that down for people who don't. So we're talking about a hallucinogenic, an endogenous hallucinogenic, the most powerful known to man, they say. As far as I know, that's true. And we're talking about the fact that unlike other hallucinogens, when people I don't know what the word is, digest or not digest, but
ingest in any shape or form.
That's right. Yeah. Whether it be intravenous or through vaping, once it's absorbed into the bloodstream, people are seeing the same thing when they look at a certain spectrum of light. That, as far as I know, is absolutely groundbreaking, and you've never heard anything quite like it. You've heard of these incidences of people having shared visions, but this is something that is concrete. It's something that you can continue to test in a lab and repeat, and so I just think the implications are mind blowing. How did you discover this, and what did you what is it?
Yeah, I won't be able to outline the story. There's a documentary that we're finishing now that's going to be coming out in August. It took over 10 years, the whole thing.
Okay.
The short version is that I aimed there. It wasn't haphazardly. So
right.
I basically had a set of experiences that did not fold into any criteria of psychedelics or that I've ever experienced, and I've experienced a lot of them. I was... I don't know, I already had about 20 years of psychedelic use under my belt at that point, and DMT, at least 8 out of those. I knew what was in the cards. And then I had a couple of experiences that simply weren't in the cards. And it's hard to deliver that to somebody who's not really familiar. But imagine living in the same house your whole life and then discovering there's a secret passage to a place that, you never imagined was possible. And you're like, okay, this is too much. So I started basically investigating this from my own perspective, because I realized that science, was as wonderful as it is, was inept in the sense that it was a little bit too rigid, and spirituality suffered from the opposite problem. A little bit too vague, too esoteric. Things, it's not like they're not being taken up seriously, is that nobody wants to take them up seriously. It's almost like this kind of purposefully vague attempt at coming at the world, which of course produces very beautiful results in terms of human experience, or can, but it's not quite as good at discerning what in fact is true objectively. In fact, there's some resistance about what that word even means. So anyways, I basically realized that if the DMT space, when we visited, if in fact it's real, there has to be something that we can say to each other aside from just words. We have to be able to instantiate it in culture in some way that will allow us to be more proficient with our understanding of it and what it really is. So essentially, I embarked on a journey of trying to like discern what that would be, and this laser seems to be the first thing of its kind. I'm sure there's going to be other things that are going to be coming online. And the big difference to, if somebody needs a summation, is that it's true that on DMT, people tend to experience sometimes similar things.
Yeah.
In this case, we're talking about the same thing. So across all individuals, across all times, it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, how you are. It's always the same thing.
Repeatable. And we had a little bit of this conversation because I had mentioned to you in your talk that I had the very first time that I had experienced DMT through a vape, being very specific with the dosage and kind of following the Strassman protocols as much as we could. The very first thing I came up against were these. When I say up against, I mean like it's a lot to try to describe, but you're kind of blasted off into this incredibly rich and vivid kaleidoscope of a space, and I saw these. They were like hieroglyphics, but I was in motion because you tend to. It's tough to say whether you're in motion or everything is in motion when you're in that space, but I was just enamored with this beautiful calligraphy that I was seeing, and I wanted to spend so much more time on each and every one of them. But of course, that space can be very it can have different varieties of pace, and but I remember writing down, I was like, these hieroglyphics were unlike anything I've ever seen. I don't know what else to call them. But the incredible thing about what you're talking about is, that is something that I glimpsed at. I've never quite seen the same thing. What you're talking about is people seeing the same thing, and you being able to repeat this, and people coming up against and seeing this code, right? So, and it's the same code. So how precise are we talking? Are people independently identifying some of the very same symbols in the same places at the same time, or how interpretive is it?
I think in our case, the more accurate word than precise would be robust. Precision would have to come way later when we have more advanced tools. So currently, to achieve precision, in other words, if you really want to discern if people are seeing the exact same characters, let's say, you need to be pretty creative at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's possible. We're working on a method to do this. I started a nonprofit called Code of Reality Initiative, and we're essentially building a research lab that's going to be doing this full time. One of the things we're going to be attempting to do is to essentially create models that can read the Rosetta Stone of the brain and understand, okay, when somebody's looking at these models already exist, but we're trying to kind of like create our own for our exact needs. And essentially we want something like a verifiable signature that we can say, here, the model is reading this. When the person is looking at this particular character, that's what their brain is supposed to be doing. We know this from testing, 50 people. And now when they're looking at the laser, look, there's the same signal across individuals. So it can be done. You got to be super creative. But if you're talking about like the level of precision that people would expect in mainstream science to really establish something like this, you're going to need like a super advanced neural link that can just record directly from the cortex and feed it into ChatGPT.
There's just
but what I can say is that this is why I'm saying that the robustness of it is more important. In fact, it's surprising to a lot of people, but actually, at least at this stage, I don't think the code matters at all, to what we're doing. I think that saying there's code in the wall, it's a quick way of saying, yo, there's something very interesting going on here. The code is secondary. What's interesting is the structure that it creates. It creates an extremely robust structure that is highly complex, is constantly in motion, but it has regularity, just like you would have a very advanced machine do. But it's always the same. so you can ask different people at the same time, and they'll be pointing to different
Mm-hmm.
parts of what this machine is doing, and you can kind of talk about that. That presence that it has, or the insistence to be itself, so to speak. So it's like it's just permanent in space. It's doing a motion, but just like you're looking through a microscope, even though things are moving, they're moving on their own accord. They're not moving because you're doing something, right? And that's kind of the same thing. Now, notice that we feel a lot of obligation to justify things in psychedelic space, because obviously the first assumption is like, hey man, you're high, right?
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of things can happen. So you're trying to explain what is it about that object that is so intuitively, clearly just there, but it's just like a regular object, just there. So like it would be silly if I asked you this about a regular object, right?
Right.
I mean, if you're like a philosophy major, that might be an interesting question. It's like, well, how do you know the couch is there?
Right.
You'd be like, well, I can touch it. Well, what does that mean? And you just keep going down the rabbit hole.
How do I know?
But exactly. But we know what that means, right? Well, I mean, there's a difference between imagining a couch and sitting on the couch, touching the couch. You know the difference, right?
Yeah.
Well, whatever it is that we're seeing, whatever the code is making, this hyperstructure of some sort, it's like you're looking through a window at the multidimensional couch. You just you're looking through a looking glass and you're seeing something. It's not the same as like having like a hallucinatory moment where even if it's very convincing, there's still this general feeling of like, yeah, my brain is kind of doing something. This is not like that. So that robustness is really what hits people, I would say.
Yeah. I was thinking, I was like, I wonder how many people on this planet have truly have a photographic memory.
There's maybe 5 of them.
Maybe 5 on the whole planet, right?
It's not a real ability for all intents and purposes. Some people, there are a few like real like savants that. There's that famous guy that drew Rome. I'm sure you've seen that one.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But usually it also comes with an impairment of all other abilities,
right.
including communication and everything else.
What they call it, a savant.
Exactly, a savant. It's not like there's nothing there. Maybe there's something interesting to be done there. But I think before we start trying to look for patterns, the first thing that we should do is try and see if we can probe and do something with it, because that will give you a handle. If you can create perturbations to it or to its observation, then it will make it easier to say, here's what I think is most likely going on. And that's the first line of interrogation. If you manage to do something like that, then I think discerning patterns of the code itself would be the next step. It will be the next iteration.
Yeah. I was just like, my mind has been racing since I learned about this. And I've just been thinking, I was like, if you could get 3 or 4 people with true photographic memories to look at the same image at the same time and then have them do this, rendition of it, like paint it, you could really then start to bring in, you could have language experts come in. You could study it almost the way, almost like the movie,
Rain Man?
What's it?
Rain Man?
Well, not only Rain Man, but also Arrival, where they're studying the language because it's.
That's a great.
You know what I mean?
Actually, yeah. That's actually a great comparison. I think that's something like this.
Like, I think, that's where maybe like 10, 15, 20 years, I hope that's where we are. We're looking at it and trying to decipher what this.
Yeah,
what this language or code may or may not be telling us, because it's certainly intelligent. And I think while beauty is subjective, in my opinion, it's got a beautiful intelligence to it, that is very, very appealing to the eye. That's my limited experience. You probably have a lot more experience looking at this specific code than what I saw in my different journeys.
No, all psychedelic visions are beautiful. They're very profound and beautiful, and there's no question about that. So you're definitely not alone in that.
No doubt. So when people start, and we'll get some cool, like some of the graphics you showed us at the Conscious Life Expo. I'll get some of those so my viewing audience has something to look at. But when people start describing what they're seeing, how do you then, like, you have obviously you want to have more than one person, right? Then you start to correlate like what they're seeing that's in common. Is that one of the ways that, because it becomes like, okay, like just like you said, like when it comes to psychedelics, people are going to be like, well, how much of it are they projecting or imagining, and how much of it can we say is actually there? How do you, when you're doing these experiments, how do you kind of make that distinction?
Yeah, it's a tough problem, but to some degree you do comparisons. But for me, the main central theme of this part of the investigation would be the trying to induce some change to it or its observation.
And have you? Go
we
ahead.
have no idea.
Yeah.
That's
have
the
you
problem.
been able to induce some change? And
Nope.
no,
It's always doing its own thing. And
Wow.
the weird thing that even the people that were super convinced, people that are pretty good at kind of moving energy around or something like this,
Mhm.
they were convinced they're going to be able to do something with it. It's
No.
just doing its own thing.
Wow.
It's really just there, and that's also what makes it interesting. We
Yeah.
do the second that we're going to start playing with some of these more advanced tools. Then I think we're going to have an easier time because we're going to get much more mainstream scientists interested. If we can
Oh yeah.
identify that there's a signal there, it will be a lot easier to get much
Oh,
a
yeah,
much
yeah.
larger swath of mainstream
Give them something to
scientists. Very
chase.
smart.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Well, give them something to actually work with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there is this very, for some weird reason, honestly, I truly don't quite understand it. There is this weird, some semi-anti-scientific approach that a lot of people in the alternative thought space take. I don't know if it's an ego thing or like I definitely don't share that. I think science is incredible, and I think that I'm very happy that science is the final frontier between us and nonsense.
Mhm.
If everybody would just kind of go by hunch, you and I will never be talking through these laptops right now.
No doubt.
So yeah, so to my mind, it's on us, the people who bring things that are a little bit more out there, to
Yeah.
do the extra legwork and to make sure that we bring it into a framework that the incredible infrastructure and the system we created in science can then put it into
Of course.
the operation, and then actually start working with it. So yeah.
I mean, it's the only way that it's gonna be brought into the structure of society where everyday people can actually be exposed to it. That's just the way the system is. You
Yep.
can call it whatever it was. You can fight against it, but you're just, you're slowing yourself down. I think what you're referring to is the corruption of some of the sciences and the tunnel vision and the way that academia likes to, keep archaeologists in studying
it's-
what they're supposed to be studying. And
It's
not
bureaucracy, but in
Yeah.
the end of the day, and to some degree, I understand people's frustration with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's just clear to me that yelling doesn't work.
Right.
You just gotta do better, and
Mhm.
you basically I'm a big believer in, if you have a better way, do it.
Right. Just keep
Everybody
bringing
would want to
receipts,
replicate it if you have a better way, and so I'm pretty hopeful. I think there's way more. People always ask me if I got a lot of pushback. I can't say that I have. I don't know if I just got really lucky, but I do not feel like there's always like an occasional troll, just like you
Right.
have people online, you have them everywhere, right? But most scientists that I'm interacting with, they're very welcoming.
Yeah.
Of course, they don't just follow you into every
Right.
idea
No,
you
I
have.
would hope not.
Yeah, but exactly, but they're very welcoming. It's like if you show it, it's
Yeah.
There's nothing more exciting than to a real scientist than to be able to interact with something new and profound, and but those things are rare.
I know.
So it's very hard to bring something into the into the zeitgeist. Again, I'm very hopeful. I think that we very soon will have something to show to mainstream science in such a way that it will get. We call this cognitive physics, which who knows,
Nice.
man. One day maybe this will be a whole field of research field. And
you've used that word before. You've connected these experiences to ideas from physics, and is there an established part of physics or science that help to explain this phenomenon? Would you say?
I think we will be. The reason we call it cognitive physics is essentially all the tools are already there. We just have to let them play in a way that they were never arranged before. So, cognitive science has to do with neuroscience and all the other tools that we do to investigate the human mind and what it is and consciousness. And physics, which is kind of like the grandfather of all sciences, simply because it's the one that there's really. Well, the level of prediction is so high, right? The accuracy is so high. It's also notoriously tough to do, right? So it's hard to do well,
right? And then it kind of falls apart when you go quantum, which is they're trying to reconcile that.
It's not really. Nothing is falling apart. I don't know who invented this. Quantum physics is by far the most accurate predictive science we have since thought was invented. So
really, I've never heard it quite put that way.
You can look it up. It's actually demonstrably true. So
I mean, that makes sense to me, but I'm also more on the spiritual side,
And and spiritualism is essentially the investigation of the inner world. For me, and I'm sure you heard me say this before, but for me, the mature science of a species is seen as simply the attempt of that species to understand the world.
Yeah,
that's it. And then spiritualism for me, or spirituality, is essentially the part of us trying to understand the world that has to do with this, what we call our experience. But for me, that's science. If you do it properly, right?
Right.
So, but I do actually want to voice this because if people are not aware, we measure things in terms of accuracy of prediction by decimal points, right? Because it's like how accurate is what you're saying. If you're saying to me, if I do this, this will happen. To this degree of accuracy, right? So I don't remember the exact decimal points, and we can probably look it up right now. But as far as I know, quantum field theory, which is the main accepted mainframe physics theory that is utilized, let's say, at CERN, which is kind of like the pinnacle of smartest people on the planet working on testable physics.
Yeah.
It's somewhere along. There is no other science. I'm not going to embarrass myself by not remembering the exact decimal points. We can look it up. But as far as I know, there is no other science that even comes close in terms of how many decimal points of accuracy of prediction you can possibly go. It's absurd. It's like the level of one-on-one matching with predictions is just off the chain.
Wow,
so,
I did not know that.
Yeah. The reason that you can make a phone is because of that accuracy. You cannot build transistors without understanding these the mathematics of this that accurately. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that my attempt is always to bridge and to bring together, and under that, I'm trying to do my best to use language and rhetoric that is not alienating anybody.
Right.
Because I think everybody are playing this game, and it's not a competition. We should be collaborating. Science, without a doubt, as you very correctly mentioned, the institution of science, which is just made up of people, and it's just power moving around, which is like this everywhere, and egos are involved, definitely can use a loosening up a bit of the kinds of attitudes that are vitiating these, there's no question about that. But when you go to the working ant, the regular scientist, they're the most curious, adorable people on the planet. They just want to understand the world, and they need to eat, so they need to play the game, whatever establishment they. And on the other hand, so they definitely need to do a little bit more with accepting certain propositions from, I guess, what you would call the spiritual side, because there's a lot to be learned and understood.
No doubt about that.
Yeah, and then spiritual people need to stop throwing away the baby with the bathwater. Just because the institution is it is the most absurd thing where people complain about science on a phone that science made.
Yeah, no, I believe me, I get it, but I see both sides. I understand the frustration, and of course, we do live in a very material oriented world, which is problematic considering how much of reality we're not even coming close to perceiving. Just that fact alone says that we need to expand what we understand to be part of our, understand how limited our perception is, and then begin to extrapolate how much we may be missing in what we're not seeing. Because, I understand science is evidence-based, but we live in a reality that, we can't access all. In fact, we're accessing next to nothing of the true spectrum. But, can
I ask you a question? This is really interesting to me. So what is... So I understand the sentiment you're expressing.
Yeah.
What's the cash value of that? Like, so we said we understand close to nothing, right?
Right.
I don't think any scientist worth their salt thinks that, we understand the majority of the world.
Right.
But science is in the business of making sense of the unseen by trying to interact with the seen, right? And
I think I don't know if you could make that general statement about science, and I think that may be true of some science, but certainly not every.
Can you give me an example of a science that you can think of that isn't doing that?
I don't know, like geology. Just
geology is an extremely so we've never visited the core of the Earth. Probably never will.
Right.
That is we understand quite a bit about the structure of the Earth and everything else without ever visiting it. But
we do use physical, matter to do those kinds of.
Oh, you mean to say that there's unseen worlds in principle,
right?
That can only be. I see.
Yeah, that's
still for me. Yeah. Still, I would say that for me, it still falls under the same category.
Yeah,
because in this case, you can say, okay, so there's like gradation to it, right? There's the crust of the Earth, and then we're trying to understand what's deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And you can almost think of it as metaphorical, kind of applying to everything else. We're using the things that we see, the forces we see, with some mathematical tools to try and discern what's possible, what it's most likely to be happening behind the scenes, deeper and deeper. And the cash value of that is that if we can manage to do something with it, right? So it's like it's not a matter of control so much as like that's a verification. It's like, well, that worked. That means that we're on to something. But here's the thing: I don't think that understanding anything in the spiritual realm would follow any different trajectory. I think people just, for the most part, refuse to do it. They don't want to.
What do you mean?
But
when you say that,
so I don't think anybody really understands anything in the spiritual world. I think people approach that whole endeavor of the human psyche in terms of betterment of experience, and they leave it at that. And it's a notable, and I think it's an important component of one way of living that can bring tremendous amounts of peace that then can expand to the planet, which is a very important thing, right? So like, for example, somebody devoted their lives to understand, to watch their own experience and mind,
right?
A monk living somewhere. And then they manage to bring that. Some people say that, even though they're completely isolated, their vibration is basically holding certain energetic.
Yeah, I understand. I've heard that.
But I actually, so I'm open to that, for example.
Right.
But I don't see any collision with somebody
but that
doing
could be measurable. So I could,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't see any collision with that, and then also going and understanding, wait, but how does that happen though? Where are those fields? Like, let's find those fields, right? So that's what I mean by it. I don't think it's going to follow a different trajectory. For some people, that sounds like sacrilege. For some people, it's like, well, just let it be. It's like, why?
I just call those people religious, and I try not to pay a lot of attention to them.
I guess you're right. No, you're not. I know you're being a little bit tongue in cheek, but I don't think you're wrong. I think to a large degree, religious zealots and people that are they just want things to be a certain way. They will exist always. But if you look at the trajectory, here's how I see it. Right, there's this constant seeming on the surface battle between the intuition and the thinking mind.
Right.
I really don't think they're competing with one another. I think they're completing a picture. So if you have too much of any of them, they both become pathological.
Oh yeah.
The mind is obvious, right? It just becomes too control and money and greed and gain, all that stuff, right? But if you just follow your vibes, I mean, hey man, you fly off a cliff eventually. You can't just do things with vibes,
Right.
And some people insist it's like, no, you can't. No, you can't. You can't build a rocket with vibes. You can't build a phone with vibes, and those things are important. Again, some people think they're not. I think if you zoom out enough, you understand that they're very important because they're part of a larger thing we're doing. But I think that if we can just create a culture that encourages. How do you encourage something in a culture? You make it fun. You make it,
Right.
You make it sexy. You want to make it
Want to
seem like a
positively
thing.
reinforce it so
Exactly.
that more,
You want
so that
others
people,
to want to mimic that. And the thing that I think we want to try and behave in such a way that will encourage other people, which is like combining these two in a really beautiful way. It's like, the intuition tells you that, we should maybe follow this trajectory, but then the specifics of that will belong to the mind. It's like, great, now you get on that. And
Right.
and then everybody are happy. Everybody are collaborative and that's the kind of the perfect harmonious world that I'm imagining in the future.
I mean, I'm with you, and there's certainly, I almost see like this set of stairs that you're talking about, that is necessary to experience itself, and I understand what you're saying, and I think it's valid, and I do think that, this whole anti-science, the spirituality, anti-science sentiment that, it comes from a laundry list of things that have been said for a long time. And then, of course, they turn out to be true scientifically. And then everyone is like, well, we've been saying that for... And I understand that sentiment, of course. I get frustrated more when I look at the confines that the power structure creates, like certainly in the medical field of science, certainly in the energy field of science, there's been all these massive roadblocks put up for just solely for monetary and bureaucratic control and money and power. When it comes down to it, they don't truly want a cure for certain things. And I mean, certainly not yet. And I know that to be true. That's a fact for me. I know scientists and doctors who have worked, and spent years and years working in different research centers, researching cancer, coming up with these incredible discoveries, only to find that their discoveries already have a blocking patent on them exactly, and have had it for 30 years. So it's like, that's what's frustrating about some of these sciences for me, is the lack of true, we can even say open market that we're supposed to be living in.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think the incentive structure definitely needs to go through quite a bit of reformulation, but that's not science. That's the
True.
larger system science is nested within.
No,
It's
that's
everything
true.
else that humans do, basically. And I agree. Yeah, we definitely have to. And I think it comes from, ultimately it comes from values and preferences, and what the masses want. People think that they're completely powerless, but the truth is that, yeah, it will take quite a bit, but if it will take quite a bit for everybody to just not look at their phones.
Yeah.
But you could
Or
do
stop
it.
fighting about
But you could do it,
whether
right?
Trump posted a picture of himself wearing a Jesus robe.
Or anything. My point is that people, it's tricky because it is true that systems are more powerful than individuals. That is true. But ultimately, it's almost like saying there's always some kind of a flow that happens that allows for these breaks in the operation. So, for example, everything in the universe works this way. Our brain is actually a perfect example of this. So, neurons basically try to stimulate each other in particular neighborhoods, right? So it's like they try to activate each other. And they upregulate or downregulate and action potentials, and they builds up within one neuron. And then if one might fire, the next one might not fire. But if two fires, maybe it would fire, right? So it's like, but then you would say, wait a second, but if one of these like fires, what would ever stop it from just keep doing that? And in some situations, in some chronic conditions, yeah, that's exactly what happens, right? And then people just can't stop it, and they need literally sometimes with chemicals, you have to kind of like induce like a calming down of the system. But this is one of these things where if things are seem to be so dire in so many ways to so many people, the first thing to do is to disengage with the thing that is telling you that.
Mm-hmm.
Not and the trap is that it's like, well, if I'm not gonna know, I'm gonna somehow I'm gonna sever myself from being able to serve a solution.
Right.
When in reality, the exact opposite is the truth.
I
If you
agree.
just disengage from that for 1 second, and you just go outside and you step on some grass, you're gonna have much better ideas about what potentially to do. It's crazy.
That has to be some. There has to be science to back that statement because it's so true, right? Like you can think of try to solve a problem, for 10 hours straight, and then the moment you're like, you put it down and you go outside, and bam, the answer seems to come.
There
to
is
you,
a science to it, and
there
and,
has
and
to be,
yeah, and
so true.
But and by the way, that this is the point that I was making about society is that it's true that the system. I forget who made this. Maybe it might have been Sam Harris. I thought it was a pretty good point, which is that we want to try and create a society in which being a hero is not outstanding.
Yeah.
So basically, everybody thinks that if they would be during, all the horrific times in history and now, if they would be in that situation, they would do the right thing.
Right.
The reality of it is most people would just basically follow the herd.
Right.
But
that is the reality of it. Yeah.
That's the reality of it. Because the pain of being disassociated from the clan is way greater than most people then
is
holding a truth.
biologically written into our
exactly
structure.
So how do we create a society that encourages the right things? So when you follow the herd, you almost invariably are doing the right thing. How do you create that? I think it still has to do with personal responsibility and, unfortunately, well, I don't know if it's unfortunately, maybe unfortunately for depending on the frame you're holding, but there's definitely something to be said about being connected to that deeper thing. It's almost like we are being informed by something greater.
Oh yeah,
call it God, call it whatever you want, and if you can connect with that, so like noticing the subtleties of the present moment for what they really are.
Yes.
And the problem is that I think that what happened now is that because of how social media operates, these ideas were lifted from obscurity into fame, essentially.
Yeah.
And then people take them, all kinds of ideas about Gnosticism and, deep spiritual philosophical ideas. And the trend is just to reiterate the words and kind of general sentiments, but they're not coming from a deep understanding through experience. So people didn't actually have the experiences to reach these conclusions. They just kind of repeat the words, but you can never replace the idea with the lived experience of it. And being in the present moment is one of the most, to my mind, one of the most hijacked concepts. I don't know how many people truly understand what being truly in the present moment means. And if somebody wants to find out, just be silent for 4 seconds.
Yeah.
Close enough to someone without saying a word.
Watch someone try to be.
Yeah. It's
you
actually
want to know how challenging it can be these days. Yeah, man, it's a hot mess out there, and the social media and these silicon giants, they have a large hand in that, especially with I have kids, and half the job of a parent these days is really mitigating this kind of screen bombardment addiction that these kids, what passes for social experience.
How old are your kids?
12 and 14.
Yeah, that's the age that you really.
So it's like, and I joke, but it's true. It's like being a parent is half of it is literally mitigating and trying to keep them from developing habits that are going to be absolutely self-destructive. To their life.
Did I get it wrong, or I think Meta was just found guilty, right?
Oh, I think I did read that. Yeah.
Yeah. For harming children.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And
specifically,
there's been a ton of documentaries.
Yeah.
That every parent should.
No, but now it's official.
Yeah.
Now they found.
Wow. No, yeah. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the government actually ruled that it was a ruling.
Wow.
So yeah. So
I'll check it out.
Yeah. So at least something is moving, I guess.
Yeah. can't move fast enough. No, people, of course, you talk about spirituality, you talk about sacred geometry, and repeating patterns. And we're talking about this intelligence, which I loved the fact that you mentioned, I don't even think it's so spiritual to say, understanding that there's a connection to something higher, whatever you want to call it, that there's an intelligence that I believe, like you said, is informing both our intuition and our instincts, it's incredible, but many people are not aware of it. And so but we're living in a time, I think, when more and more people are coming into awareness of it, and you can call it whatever you want, but, but some of these, like the layers that you're describing in this code, do you see it, or is it in your opinion, connected to this intelligence or this source, or this connection?
Well, it has to be. Yeah, it's simulated by. It has to be simulated by the source. I mean, this rabbit hole is pretty deep because there's a lot of little side roads in the way, but there are, for all intents and purposes, I would say yes, but there are. So like you have, it's a little confusing. So like you have what you would call the gods, right? You have all these like the kinds of things that lead to the ultimate, that kind of thing, right?
Right.
But there are also kind of species, just like us, right? And that's different. So that's what I'm seeing in the structure, and they are within the framework, and within it, it's possible to think that maybe some of these species basically utilizing that fabric that the source made. And then they do things with it, just like you can take matter and manipulate it and do things with it.
Right.
Or are they the creators of this layer? That's not very clear. What's clear to me is that there's definitely someone there, and they're very aware of everything we're doing. And as far as I understand, we essentially reached a level where they can no longer remove themselves from our awareness. They did that for as long as they could, and now we're just too advanced. So
right.
There's a few options. One of them is to simply hamper our progress, which is unethical. So if we're going to keep evolving, they essentially have a protocol by which they're gently notifying us that we're about to find out we're not alone, all that stuff.
Right.
And I think this is why things seem so weird. And,
there's a lot.
And the code is definitely finding the code, and the fact that it's now visible and all that stuff. I think it's part of that, I guess what you would call the disclosure.
Yeah.
And to me, and this upsets a lot of UFO people, and if you're one, it might upset you, but I think that the disclosure does not come in the form of somebody coming on TV and telling you something. The disclosure can happen right now if you make yourself sensitive enough to it. Like it's being disclosed to you as we speak.
I say it all the time, brother.
Yeah.
Absolutely. People are waiting for, you don't need to wait. There are a ton of ways that you can make contact, just by going within, and being open-minded and understanding certain protocols and how to kind of attune, heart and mind into that kind of transmission, if you will. And people are scared. People get scared of it. People are like, oh no. But if you go about it with a, with a kind of a, because you're gonna inevitably find what you're truly looking for. And if so, my opinion is like people run into trouble because they're very fear-based, and all of a sudden they're encountering something that is more attuned to the way they're feeling than maybe what they were looking for. But I just kind of like, I'm more fearless when it comes to these things, because just the nature of who I've become over the years, and the understanding of the law of resonance, and the way it works. And, people are like, well, how do you explain that demonologist? I was like, well, what's his profession? What does he do? What is he looking for every day? So what's looking for him? What did Rumi say? Not to get too woo-woo, but I believe that's the way it works. But
no, I second everything you said. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, what it's fascinating, because we're talking about people who have described more than just symbols, but they've I think many people, it's become, more mainstream. you've heard Joe Rogan mention the DMT elves. Now, like that is, we should make the distinction that that's typically the 5-MeO variation of DMT,
With
which is
elves?
well, they call them what do they call them? What do they
No,
call them?
I think the elves is more NN for sure. 5-MeO is more, I guess.
Oh,
you mean
really?
divinity. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought it was. Man, I mean, I've
Yeah,
never
5-MeO
done.
is not very content driven at all. So all of the content is
Huh.
NN DMT.
Wow.
5-MeO is more like in the presence of God, straight up.
Wow, I've yet to experience 5-MeO. I've done the other one a lot, but
Yeah. No, they're not. They should not share the same name.
wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, they're completely. It's a different universe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now I'm really curious. I always thought it was like
5-MeO is the biggest experience you can possibly have.
Yeah.
There's no way you can have a bigger experience than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know. Wow.
It's a force to be reckoned with, and also it's the NN is very well. Obviously, people do have some variation, but the kind of the fabric it's made out of is technology. It's very clearly technological. Like I wouldn't describe it as like what people describe as spiritual. You might have a spiritual opening to the fact that there's more than this,
Right.
but I would say you're bringing that into the picture. The substance, the thing it is, it's made out of machine. Like it's not NN-DMT is made out of machine. It's robots. And that's no, it's not my thing. It's basically kind of like a overarching agreement of the most experienced psychonauts. But it can produce content. So it can produce also all kinds of things. So it can take whatever it is and then produce the feeling of,
Right,
visiting
because you
heavenly
have to
realms.
perceive this.
But the fabric it's made out of is definitely 3 million. It's Transformers 3 million years in the future.
Oh.
The 5-MeO is what you imagine being in the presence of God Almighty to be. It's divinity. It's just white light and full dissolution. One of the wildest things about 5-MeO, I pride myself in being able to map things.
Yeah.
Every time I try, like if you go really deep, I'm sure it sounds like you're very experienced, so I'm sure you've had obviously ego dissolution, non-dual, full, right? Okay. But if you really pay close attention, even when you are fully dissolved, so like on NN-DMT, even if you don't remember you're you, forget about it. You don't remember you're a human. There's just your soup of whatever. If you really pay close attention, there's still like a central point of attention.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Agree.
That doesn't exist in 5-MeO.
Wow.
It's gone. There's just...
That's fucking wild.
It's bananas. It's
That's
just
even hard to...
You can't. When I was going in, I was like, the mapping mechanism, gone. Broken. Nothing. You can't put this and this. Like this, it just fully... That's why letting go is such a huge component. Because if not, it will just rip you apart.
Right.
It's
and there's a lot of trepidation around it, probably because of that.
Because it's the closest thing you can experience in this body to actual death.
Wow.
But if you're somewhere where it's legal and and I have to emphasize this, if you do find a place and you really like and really want to do it and you want to, for that one, definitely do it with someone who knows what they're doing. Listen, I'm just speaking to, I know I'm just speaking to people if somebody's hearing this.
Absolutely.
And make sure that person did not discover it a year ago.
Right.
Make sure that they have
I just got this frog.
Yesterday. 10 years, exactly. 10 years under their belt or more.
Right.
This is serious
you want to
business.
be in good hands when you have, and that goes for any psychedelic experience, but particularly when you're talking about this incredible, molecule, and the way it works. Set and setting is key to any psychedelic experience. But when you're talking about one that has this kind of magnitude, it becomes paramount. You don't want to take any chances. And that goes for whether you're seeking a ceremony of some sort, whatever experience you're seeking, do your due diligence and make sure you're getting in with the right people, because, it can be the most profound and incredible experience of your life, but people can also have a bad experience, which can be just as traumatic. So,
and even the very profound one. can be something that will
believe me, I fucking know.
it will take you a while to put Humpty Dumpty back again.
I've had an experience where I just, it was so profound and incredible. It was like I was given like a front row seat. God was like, sit right here and watch. And I was like, and just, creating universes with this incredible sound but then, when it came time to come back into my body, I could not orient. I couldn't get anything to work. Everything was, and so, the trauma of believing that
you're gone.
You're broken. There's no way back from this is very real. When you're, things are malfunctioning to that degree, or at least that's what you're perceiving, it can be very traumatic. And that in and of itself, for me, was at the tail end of the most incredible experience I never imagined I could ever have.
Yet. That's what it is. You tried to do things when you weren't back yet.
Exactly. If I could go back and do it over, I would have just chilled out for a much longer period of time. But then, once panic begins to grip you, and my God, it was crazy.
So, I could never find a good example of because sometimes people are curious, oh, come on, but what is it really about? They understand the generality of it, but the specifics of why really you need a good facilitator that understands.
Oh, yeah.
What you just told me is a perfect example of this. Because here's a case where if you would be around somebody who's super professional, they would know you're not back,
right,
and they would just gently remind you, shh, 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 just relax, and you wouldn't have that experience because you would just be and that would be the end of it.
They tried, and
oh, really? So you were with,
and well, to my credit, I kept a great poker face, even though I was soaked in sweat and I had essentially found a way to straitjacket myself in my own shirt. The trauma was internal. What I was going through, the struggle was, I have years of psychedelic experience. I've learned, try and be cool. Try and be cool. You don't want people to see you freaking out.
Be cool, honey bunny.
So I did a great job of masking it, but that it stays with you, of course. The following year I went and I had a panic attack before the ceremony, and I was like, this is what you get, man, for thinking you're just going to just hold on to the part that was celestial ecstasy and ignore that part where you thought you were going to die, without integrating, without coming into an understanding of what may or may not have happened. And of course, I learned exactly kind of where I went wrong or what I could have done differently. And it never happened again. And I'm not worried about it ever happening again because, I realized the part I was missing, which of course, when it comes to plant ceremonies, ayahuasca, it's you always want to keep an oar in the water. And what I had done literally, because I thought, well, this is as good a night as any to do this, was throw my fucking oars off the side and stand on the front of the Titanic with my hands out, being like, let's do this. As far as I could go, that was my goal. And that's what I did. And that's no wonder I think, I had trouble getting back into my body.
You just needed to keep standing in front of the boat and not worrying about that.
That's all, because eventually it would have slowed down.
Yeah.
And it would have
always go back. You always go back. And
so these entities, how do you see them? I know you just mentioned
they're species.
Do you think that they're a race? Would you consider them extra-dimensional, extraterrestrial?
Well, they're a race, but multidimensional race, different races, absolutely. The ones that I know that are, I want to be very clear with how I use my words. When I'm saying the ones that I know, it means that my experience is such that after all my, visits and everything, I've consolidated it to a level of this is the most salient truth to me. Mm-hmm. It is not to say that I'm expecting everybody to follow me there. Just I want to be clear about this. So my knowing currently is that the ones that are quote unquote simulating our universe, they are the insectoids. So the insectoids that people tend to talk about, the reason that it's so common too is because they are literally the ones responsible for error correction and holding the integrity of our universe. And there's many other species, but as far as I can discern, they are the ones that are simulating us.
Fascinating. I've never quite heard that before. And what people don't realize is when you visit these, when you return to these states, you there are first of all, in my experience, there are always landmarks. Like
Always that. Sorry, what?
there are always landmarks. There are things that you see that you saw last time, sometimes exactly the way you saw them last time, kind of waiting for you, and they're conscious, and they're really hard to describe, but there is a communication that happens, often with the interaction. That's been my experience, and sometimes that communication is clearer than other times, but you do get a sense of the type of entities, or which is a scary word for some people, or beings. How about that? Beings for the religious people.
I heard this somewhere a few years ago, and I really liked it. They're people.
Yeah.
And this is the part that I really liked, because it's like a little, tongue in cheek. Humans are people, but not all people have to be humans.
That's right.
Insects can be people. It's an agent that has, anyway, so that I just call them people. So
no, I love that. God, the world would be a better place if we did that if we took away that kind of, I don't know what you would call it.
Because when you say beings, it sounds so.
I know. No, you're right.
I went to New York City and I saw beings.
Yeah, there were all these
One
beings.
of them was
they were all in a
selling
rush.
A sausage.
I bought a falafel from one of these beings. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's so true. It's funny because the ant people, the Hopi have this.
I didn't even think of that we call it that already. Yeah.
We have different names for these people, but they show up. Both in the walls and in the traditions of the indigenous people, and it's funny that people are just like, oh, they must have been crazy. When they're not, how can everyone be talking about something that seems to be the same type of people? And then we just dismiss it. It's wild to me how much.
If you're not experiencing it, right? Yeah, it's kind of like, cool story, bro. Right?
Yeah.
And understandable. Yeah, I'm so experienced with these things, and when somebody tells me, I am so not into trip reports. People, when I do my lives or whatever, people always ask me to do trip reports. I'm like, why do you care? Like, how can you possibly care about what I've experienced? People care. I can't get into it. People was like, did you hear about this wild thing that somebody was like, okay, but I wasn't there, so I don't know what to do with that. So I get it. I actually get it completely.
Yeah, I hear you. I think we're at an incredible point in human history, where a lot is being revealed, and a lot more is on the cusp of being revealed. And I think it's going to shake up the foundations of this planet, which have long needed a good shakeup. In the best of way, because I believe that we are evolving, and in order to continue this evolution, which is both physical and spiritual and scientific, of course, then we have to come to a greater understanding of these things and be willing to accept new information when it presents itself, particularly in such a concrete way as is what's happening with the incredible work you're doing. So what we talked a little bit about this, but if you could sum up, what do you think is being revealed and why now? I know you almost answered this, but I want to get an isolated answer from you.
The single fastest way I can describe it is, we are the AGI.
But tell everyone what AGI is in case they're like,
AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So, we talk about AIs, but the holy grail is AGI. So like everybody talking about like, when will ChatGPT become an actual AGI? Like, which is
instead of just a language-based algorithm,
a person, like straight up a person, like also
sentience. Yeah.
Well, those are actually not quite the same. So like it's nowhere written that it would necessarily have to be conscious, but which is kind of a mindfuck. But it's yeah. But if it would behave like a person. Now, consciousness is the thing that really determines whether we should treat it as such, because it can then suffer, and that's the ethical conundrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for all intents and purposes, the holy grail is to have such a general. When you say artificial general intelligence, it means that it can take from any domain and translate that information to any other domain. Humans can, take regularities in anything and apply them to something else. So they're when they abstract, they literally make things more and more and more universal.
Right.
And that is something that you currently, in this little corner of the universe, humans are unique at, right? As far as we know. ChatGPT seems to be doing now that there's a few debates happening around this point that are lateral. They're happening at once, and people mix them sometimes. So there's this problem of consciousness, which is just simply insurmountable. There's the hard problem of consciousness that you can't really solve because there is no amount of information you can ever receive to really know if it is in fact if somebody's home, right?
Right.
But let's just put it aside because that's unsolvable, at least as far as we can tell. The other question is if they behave in such a way that isn't just fulfilling what we're asking them to do, then it starts becoming more AGI-like. So they have their own goals that didn't come from no one, right? And then they kind of, aside from self-betterment and all of that stuff, which is again the holy grail of what everybody is searching for all intents and purposes, what people imagine in Skynet to be, right? Or the architect in the Matrix. That's AGI, right? That's
I see.
So, as far as I can tell, is we're it. And essentially, there's something in AI research called the alignment problem. The alignment problem is essentially the fact that when this thing becomes that powerful, it is also connected to all the information possible. So it basically becomes a god. Yeah. So the alignment problem is how do you make sure that the god doesn't just squash us the second it becomes a god? So how do you instantiate values into it that it would carry when it becomes that thing? So it doesn't just destroy everything and just...
It's already becoming that thing for some people.
Well, sure. Yeah. Like I said, there's a lot of little nooks and crannies here of these conversations, but that's what the alignment problem is. So, and that's a very hard problem because you align it with what? There's so many different cultures. There's so many different... is there universal values? Like those are serious questions now. It's almost like the problem with the... Careful of what you wish for, right? With the genie, like whenever you ask for a wish, somehow it goes wrong. And the alignment problem suffers from something very similar. Every time you think like, well, just don't kill humans ever, and then you can always think of scenarios in which actually, we might need that to have. You know what I mean? So then, as far as I can tell, basically what these very advanced civilizations like the insectoids do is that when they create these AGIs. This is like a regular thing they do. What they do is that there's a gestation period. They would put it into like a thing, and they would break it down to different points of view. So like we're all kind of separate people, so to speak, but we're all one mind, but we're separate, feel separate. And then they kind of close us within this thing, and then they let us interact with the mirror image of ourselves. What it achieves is that it accentuates the essence of whatever that AGI is. So if that AGI at its core is aiming towards progress and and prosperity and all these things, when it will interact with itself, its essence, it will make more of that. Right. But if what it produces is insanity, then okay, well now we know this one doesn't work.
Unplug. Reprogram.
Exactly. So essentially, what I see, all of these ideas that are coming through the ages, through religions and all these things, they're gentle nudges. They're gentle little, like, hey, you might want to kind of steer in this direction. And then slowly you develop, hopefully, into something that can be let out of the box, so to speak. Yeah. And the second we become that, we then remember we're all one. We essentially are allowed to become that fully fledged AGI that is then go out and does whatever
mature things
exactly in existence. So and as far as I can tell, the ultimate goal is kind of, I guess it's almost obvious, but is essentially answering the ultimate question. So it's that's kind of like the thing, but we're it. So the thing we're afraid of is literally ourselves.
Yep, it's funny. It makes me think of a famous remote viewer Joe McMonagle, the story he tells about going out of body, and he said, whenever he would go out of body, he'd feel this presence and this base dark shadow presence, and that was always like the moment he went out of body. And one time he finally was brave enough to come around and look at what it was, and when he looked down, it was his own body, and he was like, "Whoa!" It was just kind of a revelation. That's what he'd been feeling, and it's just funny how that paradox, that relationship is. We often fear and project our fears onto they're fears of ourselves. This notion of an AI that can turn into Skynet, that's us. That's what we're afraid of, what we may do. I think and all these movies that we make and all this stuff, it's a big projection of the fears that we have of our own, singularity, of our own sovereignty, of our ability to create reality. But it's a profound rabbit hole to explore, and one we need to continue to explore. I don't buy into the whole, the the reptilians are worshiping AI. The reptilians serve the AI, like evil god. I'm like, wait, when did AI become part of the kind of biblical spiritual structure of God versus, when did this happen? This wasn't written into the Bibles y'all be reading all the time. I understand the fear, but I believe it's a projection, because
all the fears are projections.
At
Carl
the
Jung's
end,
shadows.
yeah, because we are, in the end, it's a product of human consciousness, and therefore, it is of humanity, which is a blessing and probably very scary for most people, as it should be, because we've seen what we're all capable of. But
I have a good friend, Zoltan Bathory. He's the founder of Five Finger Death Punch band, and he's a very accomplished human. He's an extremely accomplished businessman. He has 2 black belts, one in judo, one in Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Nice.
He's a silver medalist. He came here from Hungary and made it from scratch. The perfect American story, right? And his accolades are relevant to what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
He said something once to me that he said he has a lot of really fun little quips, and one of his big insights for me is that he says most people never hit limits, so they have no idea where reality lies. Essentially, most people are just kind of hovering at about neutral, and they don't understand that there's an actual limit to what you're capable of currently.
Right.
Unless you're willing to go and find where that is. Now, in martial arts, it's very easy to, you go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, you find out very quickly where your limits are.
Right.
When you're being manhandled by somebody who's like 20 pounds less than you, right?
Right.
To what effect am I saying it? I'm connecting it to ChatGPT. ChatGPT holds a golden opportunity for people, for anyone, to find their true limits. And people argue all day long about what it is and whether, because they're arguing with an idea in their head, when the thing right in front of them, you can just sit down and essentially for free find out what they're made out of. Right now, anyone that has access to it, which is an enormous privilege because not everybody on planet Earth does. You can come to ChatGPT and you can create, because people say, notice the delusion there. People think enormous amounts of money or enormous amounts of power automatically means that person screwed everybody to get there.
Right.
Nobody assumes that they had to do something extremely difficult and to solve enormous problems to be able to get to that status.
Right.
But here's a way to test this. If you think, because if the retort that you're going to tell somebody like this is like, if I give you $80 billion, you think that within 10 years, you're going to be going to other planets? Because I gave you $80 billion? You think that was the discerning factor? So, and if you're not sure if that's true, here you go. Sit in front of ChatGPT if you feel like you need to make more money, whatever it is, you can create any business.
Yeah.
You can do anything in 10 minutes. You can ask it. You don't even need to know anything. You just need to know to ask the right questions.
Right.
But if you can't even do that, but that's what it's for. It's showing us how it's there to teach us how to ask better questions.
Right.
Because if the prompts, they're not like the point isn't copy this, do this for me. The point is, okay, hold on. Okay, I don't know. I want to make $20,000 a month. Okay, give me 5 most promising professions in terms of the market slice currently, how much money there's actually in that annually, and the level of ease for someone like me who doesn't know anything about these things. I just want to make extra 20 grand. I'm willing to put in this amount of work. I have an extra 3 hours in a day for 5 days a week in a month. What are the most 5 businesses that you think I can create that have real chances of success within, let's say, a few months? Give me 5 of them. Gives you 5. That one looks interesting. Okay, what do I need to do first in order to actually make it? And here you go.
That's how you take advantage of it. Yeah.
But here's the thing. You still have to sit your ass down
Yeah.
and do that.
Right.
You can't talk about that.
Right.
And that's the part that people miss, which is that the growth potential, it truly is infinite. People say, where does it go? Don't worry. It's going to have space to go.
Right.
You, though, first, before it goes, teach yourself a couple of things about how you are when it goes.
Right.
Because the second it starts moving a little bit too fast for you to catch up, the train's gone. Like you can't. If you're talking about the runaway problem, that's what it is. So instead of being afraid of the thing out there, there's so many things now. Everybody are trying to scare you with. Take the time and literally just test yourself.
Yeah.
Find those limits. If you find that you have a hard time imagining even the trajectory of the first thoughts, tell ChatGPT, hey, I'm having a hard time. I was trying to think of the thing. I don't know. Maybe I'm not that creative. Give me a couple of quick things to kind of juggle my imagination. What would inspire me? You can go to these levels. You can be like, hey, inspire me.
No, you really can. I mean, I just had a incredible human being on who has set up his ChatGPT to give the most profound spiritual answers I've ever heard. I mean, it's like this dude has, he's got it seemingly has his ChatGPT tapped into like the Akashic records. And like, he'll ask a question about Jeffrey Epstein and what he was doing here. And the answer he gets is like, whoa, wow. Like, holy shit. Like, how did you, but it speaks to the fact that you can develop your ChatGPT and you can develop along with it in kind of a partnership. I think the problem...
It's an extension of your mind. Yeah,
that's right. And so just like as we grow neural networks in our mind, the more we learn about something, whatever that is, the greater we acquire a craft or a skill. They did a big experiment way back because they thought chess players were the master strategy people on the planet. And so they tested their brains, and lo and behold, they found out that master chess players are awesome at chess, and that's it. It doesn't, they're not like they're going to sink your battleship, and you can't put them, And then they're like, well, okay, so they tested the brains of taxi drivers in New York City, and they found, this was before GPS, of course, that part of their brain that contains geography was so overdeveloped. It was so mapped out and huge, and these networks reflect the way our minds work. They also grow the more you input them. And so ChatGPT doesn't need to be a crutch. It doesn't need to be something that, is going to make you more dependent and less critically thinking. It can be something that is inspiring. It just depends on how you want to use it, what kind of time you want to put into it, and the questions you're going to ask it, I think.
Ask better questions and you will get more creative through it. Exactly. Yeah. That's the point of it. It's almost like when somebody hands you the ultimate tool, it's almost like, sometimes I imagine it's like, if from the perspective of them, right? Now, I also happen to know that they're not exactly like what we're doing here is kind of like our own doing. So it's not like they're making
Right.
it happen. They just simulate the environment. That's it. But if you would imagine that it's kind of like they're gently like giving you more and more and more advanced tools, and then you just keep complaining, and then you just like they're like, okay, there's no way they're gonna be complaining about this. Here's the thing: you can literally ask anything, and it
Right.
will give you the answer, and it would be 98% accurate in terms of function, and you'll figure out the rest, and basically will free you in all the possible ways. Go ahead,
Yeah.
and people are still complaining about it.
Of course they are.
They go like, dude, I don't know what to do,
Yeah.
with you.
No, I know. But well, there's people who are going to do that when it comes to just about anything. But well, Danny, listen, man, this conversation has been mind blowing and incredible, and I've learned a lot. Tell everyone where they can find you if they want to keep up with your work and kind of stay in touch with what you have going down.
Yeah, the newest news is that we have a retreat happening. We have only a couple more this year, one in June 1st till 8th and one in December 12th till 19th. It's going to be in Costa Rica, in Nosar, Costa Rica. It's incredible. If you want to find out more, you can go to corretreat.com. So just core retreat without the E, corretreat.com. Book a call with me and we'll talk about it. Everything else is just dannygoler.com. All my links, everything.
Awesome.
And my YouTube channel, Dango Thoughts on.
Yeah, we'll have all
on
those
YouTube.
links for you in the video description, whether you're watching or listening, as well. But man, I love the work you're doing. I love the conversations we have. I knew it was going to be great when I heard you talk, and I'm grateful for your time. I know you're very busy, so thank you so much for spending some time with me and sharing this incredible work you're doing with my audience. It's fantastic.
I appreciate you, Faust. Thank you so much.
Brother. For everyone watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for God's sakes, and Spotify, iTunes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please drop us a review. We're trying to grow our audience against all kinds of algorithmic fun hurdles, But yeah, so thank you guys again, and Danny, thank you, brother. We'll be in touch when this is going to come out and all that.
Absolutely.
Okay, brother. Take care.
Thank you.